German officers in Haarlem searched for armed men. They arrested resistance fighters every week. 214 arrests in 16 months, 53 executions. Their procedures worked perfectly. Until July 14, 1943. A German Hauptsturmführer named Heinrich Völker walked into a cafe. He was 34 years old. He coordinated deportations at the railway station. 612 Jews sent to death camps in 4 months. He ordered a beer. He read a newspaper. He did not see the 17-year-old girl sitting 3 tables away. Truus Oversteegen wore a blue dress. She carried a small purse. Inside the purse was a Belgian FN Model 1910 pistol, loaded, 6 rounds. She smiled at Volker. She asked for a light. He said he did not smoke. 8 minutes of conversation later, she suggested a walk in the forest. He agreed. They walked 200 meters into the woods. Pine needles softened their footsteps. Birds sang. Truus stopped. She reached into her purse. She drew the pistol. She fired twice. Both shots missed. Volker drew his weapon. He aimed at Truus's chest. From 18 meters away, another teenage girl fired a rifle. 1 shot. The bullet entered Volker's back between the shoulder blades. He fell to the ground. He tried to crawl. His hand reached for a photograph in his breast pocket. A wife and 2 children. His fingers never touched it. He died 3 minutes later. The Gestapo launched the largest manhunt in Haarlem history. They arrested 6 men that evening. All were innocent. All were questioned under torture. They were looking for male resistance fighters. Armed, dangerous, professional. They were not looking for teenage girls carrying grocery baskets. How did 2 sisters with no military training kill 12 German officers without a single arrest? How did 8 years of poverty become a weapon more effective than any commando training? This is the story of the Oversteegen sisters, the invisible army. Truus Oversteegen was 9 years old when she learned her first survival skill. Her mother taught her to iron shirts for neighbors, 5 cents per shirt. The iron weighed 2 kilograms. Her hands were too small. She burned her left palm 3 times in the first week. The scars stayed for life. Her mother said pain teaches you not to make mistakes twice. Truus was born August 29, 1923 in Haarlem. Her father left when she was 7. Her mother cleaned houses for 12 guilders per week. That paid for 2 rooms on Kleine Houtstraat. Enough for bread and potatoes. Not enough for mistakes. Freddie Oversteegen was born September 6, 1925. 3 years younger than Truus. Smaller, quieter. She drew birds in schoolbook margins. Sparrows, robins. She wanted to travel somewhere war did not exist. Their mother taught them a second survival skill. How to be invisible. When rent was due and there was no money, they walked past the landlord's office in silence. No eye contact, shoulders relaxed, walk at normal speed. The landlord could not demand payment from girls who did not exist. Truus practiced this for 8 years. By 1940, she could walk past anyone without being remembered. No facial features registered. No gait stood out. She was a shape that moved through space and left no impression. When German troops marched into Haarlem on May 14, 1940, Truus watched from the window. She was 16. Freddie was 14. 140 soldiers marched down Grote Markt. Boots struck cobblestones in synchronized rhythm. The sound echoed off brick walls. Truus counted every soldier. Freddie drew what she saw. Boots, rifles, helmets, no faces. Their mother stood behind them. She said one sentence, "We do not exist to them. That is how we survive." By September 1940, their apartment had 6 people, Treintje, Truus, Freddie, a Jewish couple named Abraham and Rachel Levi. They slept in the kitchen. At night, Truus could hear Rachel crying, quiet crying. The kind that comes when you do not want anyone to know. The apartment had a crawl space behind the stove, 1 meter by 2 meters. 4 people could fit if they did not move, if they did not breathe loudly. On November 18, 1940, Gestapo officers knocked on every door. Truus heard boots 2 floors below. 4 people crawled into the space. A man named Simon, his wife Esther, their 2 daughters, ages 6 and 9. The knock came at 21:47. 3 hard strikes. Truus opened the door. 2 Gestapo officers, both tall, both armed. One spoke Dutch with a German accent. He said, "Who lives here?" Truus said, "My 2 daughters and me." The officer looked past her into the apartment. He saw 2 beds, 1 table, a stove, laundry hanging from a rope. He said, "Are you hiding Jews?" Truus said no. Behind the stove, Simon held his 6-year-old daughter's mouth with his hand. The girl's eyes were open. She did not blink. Her chest rose and fell too fast. She was going to make noise. The officer stepped into the apartment. His boots were loud on the wooden floor. He walked to the beds. He looked under them. Nothing. He walked to the table. He opened a drawer. Forks, knives. He walked toward the stove. Truus stepped between him and the stove. She said, "Excuse me, sir, do you want tea?" Her voice did not shake, but under her dress, sweat ran down her spine. Cold sweat. The officer looked at her. Truus was 16. She looked 14, small, harmless. He said no. He turned. He walked to the door. The second officer followed. They left. Truus closed the door. Her hand shook when she turned the lock. Not before. After. Behind the stove, the 4 people stayed silent for 11 more minutes. When they emerged, Simon's hand was still covering his daughter's mouth. The girl had wet herself. Esther took the child to the bathroom. No one spoke. That night, Truus lay in bed. Her hands would not stop shaking. She pressed them against her stomach. That did not help. She bit her lip until it bled. That helped. Freddie whispered from the other bed. "Are you scared?" Truus said yes. Freddie said me too. The German never knew 4 people breathed 3 meters from his boots. German checkpoint procedures were specific. Search all males aged 16 to 45. Search anyone carrying tools or large bags. Search anyone traveling alone after dark. Search anyone who avoids eye contact. The procedures worked. Between May 1940 and September 1941, German forces arrested 214 resistance members in Haarlem. 53 were executed. 161 were sent to camps. The procedures were not stupid. They were logical. They caught real threats. But the procedures had one assumption built into every line. Resistance fighters looked like fighters. Men, armed, dangerous. Adults who made decisions. The procedures did not account for teenage girls carrying grocery baskets. Not because German intelligence was incompetent. Because the assumption was reasonable. Children were not soldiers. Women were not assassins. The Germans were professionals fighting amateurs. Except these amateurs had spent 8 years learning how to disappear. Franz van der Wiel brought 3 revolvers to the forest outside Bloemendaal on June 18, 1943. A British Webley, Mark II, a German Luger, PL8, a Belgian FN model, 1910. Each gun had different weight, different recoil, different kill. Truus Oversteegen was 17 years old. She had never held a firearm. Van der Wiel placed the Webley in her hand. The gunmetal was cold against her palm. She had not expected that. Metal should feel neutral. This felt like ice. The gun weighed 1 kilogram. Her hand dropped. Not from weakness, from surprise. Van der Wiel said, "Aim at the tree. 20 meters. Fire when ready." Truus raised the gun. Her arm shook. She squeezed the trigger. The recoil hit like a punch. The gun jerked upward. The shot went high. The bullet struck a branch 4 meters above the target. The gunpowder smell was sharp, acrid. It stuck in her throat like smoke from burning rubber. Again. Truus fired 14 more times. By the 15th shot, she hit the target 3 times out of 5 attempts. Her right hand had a bruise forming on the palm from the Webley's recoil. The bruise would turn purple by evening, black by the next morning. Freddie was 16, smaller than Truus. The Webley was too heavy for her. Vanderveel gave her the FN model 1910, lighter, easier to conceal, less stopping power. Freddie's first shot hit dirt 3 meters in front of the target. Her hand shook before she fired. Not after. Before. From anticipating recoil she had not yet experienced. Vanderveel said, "Hold tighter. Breathe out before you squeeze." Freddie fired again. Better. The shot hit the tree trunk 1 meter below the target. Still not accurate enough to kill from more than 3 meters. She fired 37 more times. By the 38th shot, her hands were shaking from muscle fatigue, not fear. She could hit center mass from 5 meters. 7 meters on a good attempt. 10 meters was still too far. Freddie had learned to carry heavy baskets without showing pain. 6 years of hauling wet laundry through Haarlem streets. 40 kilograms sometimes. Her arms had ached, but she never complained. Complaining meant losing the work. Losing the work meant no food. That skill helped now. The gun was light compared to laundry baskets. The recoil hurt her hands, but she did not stop. Pain was familiar. Pain was manageable. Hannie Schaft had trained with firearms before joining the resistance. She fired 21 rounds that day. All but 3 hit the target. They practiced for 6 hours on June 18th. Truus fired 43 rounds. Freddie fired 38. By evening, Truus's right hand had a purple bruise the size of a guilder coin. Freddie's hands trembled when she tried to hold a cup of water. Hannie's ears rang for 3 hours after they stopped shooting. The forest smelled of pine needles and damp earth. Summer smell. The kind that would have been pleasant if they were not learning to kill. Vanderveel said shooting is the easy part. Now you learn to get close enough to shoot. The second training session was June 20th, 1943. Vanderveel recruited 2 resistance members to play German officers. Both men wore civilian clothes. Both spoke German. One was Piet Jansen, 31 years old. Carpenter before the war. He had built furniture for wealthy families in Amsterdam. Now he built coffins for resistance operations. His hands were calloused from decades of woodwork. The other was Henrik Mulder, 28 years old, schoolteacher. He had taught mathematics to children, ages 10 to 14. When schools were forced to use Nazi curriculum in 1941, Henrik stopped teaching. He said he would not teach children lies. Vanderveel explained the plan. Approach the target in a public space, cafe, bar, street corner. Start a conversation. Flirt if necessary. Suggest a walk to a quiet location. Lead him into a place where witnesses cannot see. Execute. Leave separately. Truus approached Piet first. They met in a cafe in Bloemendaal. Piet sat at a table reading a newspaper. Truus walked to his table. She said, "Excuse me, do you have the time?" Her voice cracked on the word time. Not from fear, from nerves. Piet looked up. "He said it is 2 o'clock. Truus said thank you. It is such a nice day." Piet said yes. Silence. Truus did not know what to say next. The conversation died. Vanderveel said, "Start again." Truus had spent 8 years making herself invisible to her landlord. Never speak unless spoken to. Never draw attention. Never exist in a way that required acknowledgement. Now, she had to do the opposite. Be visible. Be memorable. Be interesting enough that a man would follow her into a forest. The skill was reversed, but the control was the same. Choose what people see. Choose when they see it. Truus tried 8 more times. On the 9th attempt, she maintained a conversation for 2 minutes without awkward pauses. But when she suggested a walk, she walked too fast toward the forest. Her body language screamed urgency. Piet said, "You look nervous. Are you all right?" Vanderveel stopped the exercise. He said slower, "You are seducing him, not rushing him to an execution. He must believe this is his idea." Truus practiced 12 more times. By the 12th attempt, she could walk slowly enough that Piet believed he was making the decision to go into the forest. Freddie practiced next. She was younger, quieter. Her approach was different. Less flirtation, more innocence. She asked Henrik for directions. He gave them. She asked if he could show her. He agreed. They walked toward the forest. At the designated point, Freddie reached into her coat pocket to draw the practice weapon. Henrik saw the movement. He grabbed her wrist. Freddie froze. Her brain stopped processing information. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Not because she chose silence, because panic had shut down her speech like a door slamming. Her vision narrowed. She could see Henrik's hand on her wrist, but nothing else. Tunnel vision, the kind that comes when the brain decides everything except the immediate threat is irrelevant. Vanderveel stopped the exercise. He said if he grabs you, you scream. Truus and Hannie will hear. They will come. But you must make noise. Silence means they do not know you need help. They practiced the grab scenario 11 times. On the first attempt, Freddie could not scream. Her throat would not work. On the second attempt, she screamed but froze afterward. On the third attempt, she screamed and tried to pull away, but Henrik held her easily. Vanderveel taught her to use her weight. Drop suddenly. Make yourself heavy. Most men expect resistance, not dead weight. It breaks their grip for 1 second. 1 second is enough to scream again or run. By the 11th attempt, Freddie could break Henrik's grip in 2.5 seconds. Scream, drop, pull, run. Her wrist had red marks from repeated grabs. The marks would fade by morning, but she would remember the feeling of a hand closing around her wrist for the rest of her life. The third training session was June 25, 1943. Full simulation. All 3 women participated. Piet played the target. Vanderveel told him resist if you sense danger. Make this realistic. Truus approached Piet in the cafe. She smiled. She talked about the weather. She asked if he was from Haarlem. He said yes. She said she knew beautiful places to walk. He said he would like to see them. They walked to the forest, 320 meters from the cafe. Truus maintained conversation the entire way. Her heartbeat was loud in her ears, but her voice stayed steady. At the designated point, Truus reached into her coat pocket. She pulled the practice revolver, aimed at Piet's chest. She hesitated. 2 seconds. In combat, 2 seconds meant death. Vanderveel said, "Why did you stop?" Truus said, "I do not know." Vanderveel said, "Your brain is processing that this is a person. That is normal. That is human. But if you hesitate in the real operation, he will draw his weapon. He will kill you, or he will arrest you. Gestapo interrogation lasts days. They will ask for names. Everyone gives names eventually." Truus said, "I understand." Vanderveel said again. They repeated the sequence 14 times. On the first attempt, Truus hesitated for 2 seconds. On the second, 1.5 seconds. On the third, 1 second. By the 14th attempt, she could draw and aim in under 1 second without hesitation. But Vanderveel noticed something. Truus's hands were steady when she drew the weapon, but her breathing stopped, completely stopped, for 3 to 4 seconds. Her face paled slightly. Not from fear, from oxygen deprivation. Vanderveel said, "If you stop breathing, you will pass out, or your vision will narrow. You must breathe during the action." Truus practiced breathing while drawing the weapon. It felt wrong. Her body wanted to hold air. Holding air felt like control, but Vanderveel was right. By the 20th repetition, her vision started to blur. Her fingers tingled, not from cold, from blood rushing away from extremities as her body prepared for collapse. She practiced 30 more times. Draw, breathe, aim. Her body slowly learned the pattern. On the 43rd practice attempt, Truus aimed the practice gun at Piet. She squeezed the trigger. Click. Piet fell to the ground, playing dead. Truus looked at him, lying still, face in the dirt, arms splayed, her stomach turned. She stepped to the side. She vomited into the bushes, not from fear, from realization. In 6 days, the man on the ground would not stand up. He would not brush dirt off his clothes. He would not laugh about the exercise. He would be dead because of her. Vanderveel walked over. He said nothing. He waited. Truus wiped her mouth. She said, "I am ready." Again, Freddie's simulation went differently. She was assigned to be backup, hidden in the forest with a rifle. If Truus failed, Freddie would shoot from distance. Vanderveel positioned Freddie 18 meters from the killing zone, behind an oak tree. He gave her a hunting rifle, bolt action, 5 rounds, heavier than the pistol, different aiming. Vanderveel said, "If Truus fails, you fire. Center mass. Do not aim for the head. Too small. Aim for the chest." The simulation began. Truus led Piet into the forest. At the designated point, Truus drew her weapon. This time, Vanderveel had told Piet to resist. Piet saw the gun. He moved. Fast. He grabbed Truus's arm and twisted. The practice gun fell. Piet pushed Truus to the ground. Freddie aimed through the rifle scope. She saw Piet. She saw Truus on the ground. Her finger was on the trigger. The trigger was cold. She could feel the metal ridge. She did not fire. Vanderveel stopped the exercise. He walked to Freddie. He said, "Why did you not shoot?" Freddie said Truus was too close. "I might hit her." Vanderveel said, "If you do not shoot, he kills Truus. Then he arrests you. Then he arrests everyone you know. You must shoot even if the angle is bad." Freddie said, "I cannot shoot if Truus is in the way." Vanderveel said, "Then Truus dies." They practiced this scenario 9 more times. Each time Vanderveel made the angle worse, Truus closer to Piet. Less clear shot. Freddie had to learn to shoot when conditions were not perfect. On the 7th attempt, Freddie fired. The practice round hit Piet in the shoulder. Not center mass, not lethal, but enough to stop him. Vanderveel said better. Again. By the 9th attempt, Freddie could fire within 3 seconds of Truus falling. Her accuracy was not perfect, but she fired. That was the point. The 4th training session was July 1st, 1943. Escape routes. Vanderveel mapped 6 different paths out of the forest. Each path led to a different street in Haarlem. They timed each route. Path 1 through the cemetery. 4 minutes 32 seconds at walking speed. 2 minutes 18 seconds at running speed. Path 2 through residential streets. 6 minutes 12 seconds walking. 3 minutes 40 seconds running. Path 3 through farmland north of the forest. 7 minutes 51 seconds walking. 4 minutes 19 seconds running. Truus memorized Path 2. Freddie memorized Path 1. Hannie memorized Path 3. They practiced walking each path without maps, without looking at street signs. Navigate by memory. On the first attempt, Truus got lost. She took a wrong turn and ended up at a checkpoint she was supposed to avoid. Vanderveel said if this was real, you would be arrested. Truus practiced the route 8 more times. By the 9th attempt, she could navigate it in darkness. Freddie practiced her route 11 times. On the 4th attempt, she twisted her ankle on uneven ground in the cemetery. The ankle swelled. She could barely walk. The pain was sharp, hot, like a nail driven into bone. Vanderveel said you need to practice injured. You might be shot. You might fall. You must be able to escape even if you are hurt. Freddie wrapped her ankle with cloth, torn from her dress. She practiced the route 3 more times while injured. Each step sent pain up her leg. Her mouth was dry. She tried to swallow. Nothing happened. Her body was shutting down non-essential functions to deal with the pain. But she completed the route. 6 minutes 48 seconds. Slower than normal, but she made it. The 5th training session was July 8, 1943. Full dress rehearsal. Everything combined. Approach, conversation, walk to forest, execute, escape. Piet played the target. He was told to behave like a real German officer, suspicious, trained, armed with a practice weapon. Truus entered the cafe at 14:00. She wore a blue dress. She carried a small purse. Inside the purse was the FN Model 1910 loaded with practice rounds. Piet sat at a table near the window. Truus walked past him once, made eye contact, smiled slightly, kept walking. This was intentional. First contact should be brief, not aggressive. Let him notice you, then approach. Truus walked to the counter, ordered tea. The tea smelled of bergamot, weak tea, wartime tea. She stood at the counter for 2 minutes. Piet glanced at her 3 times. On the third glance, Truus walked to his table. She said, "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" Piet said, "No, please sit." They talked for 6 minutes. Weather, the war, food shortages, normal conversation. Truus laughed twice, practiced laughs. They sounded real. Truus said, "I know a place with a beautiful view. Would you like to see?" Piet hesitated. Van der Wiel had told him to be suspicious. Piet said, "Where is this place?" Truus said, "A forest nearby. Very quiet. We can talk without everyone listening." Piet said, "All right." They walked to the forest. Freddie followed at 40 meters distance. Hannie was already positioned with the rifle. At the designated point, Truus stopped walking. She turned to face Piet. She reached into her purse. Piet saw the movement. He stepped back. His hand went to his hip where his practice weapon was holstered. Truus drew faster, aimed, fired. Practice round hit Piet in the chest. Van der Wiel stepped out from behind a tree. He said, "Time from draw to shot 0.8 seconds. Good. But he saw your movement too early. Your hand went into the purse before you stopped walking. That gave him warning." Truus said, "I did not realize." Van der Wiel said he realized. "That gets you killed. Again." They practiced the full sequence 6 more times. On the 7th attempt, Truus waited until after she stopped walking to reach for the purse. Piet did not see the movement until the gun was drawn. Too late. Van der Wiel said, "Better. 1 more time." By the end of the day, July 8, 1943, Truus had completed the full sequence 47 times over 3 weeks of training. Freddie had fired over 180 rounds. They had walked the escape routes until they could navigate them in darkness. They had practiced conversations until they could flirt with men they intended to kill. Van der Wiel gathered all 3 women. He said, "You're ready. The first operation is July 14th, 6 days from now." Truus asked, "Who is the target?" Van der Wiel pulled out a photograph. A German officer in uniform. He said, "Hauptsturmführer Heinrich Völker, 34 years old. He coordinates deportations at Haarlem railway station. In 4 months he has sent 612 Jews to Westerbork. From Westerbork they go to death camps." Van der Wiel placed a second photograph on the table. A woman with 2 children, ages 6 and 9. The woman was smiling. The children wore Sunday clothes. Van der Wiel said his wife and children. He carries this photograph in his wallet. You will find it after. Truus looked at the photograph. She did not touch it. Van der Wiel said, "I show you this because you must understand. He is not a monster. He is a man with a family. He goes home to them every evening. He reads bedtime stories to his children, and every morning he sends hundreds of people to their deaths." Both things are true. Freddie said, "How do you know he will be at the cafe?" Van der Wiel said he goes every Wednesday at 2 o'clock. He drinks beer. He reads the newspaper. He sits at the same table. Germans are creatures of habit. That is their weakness. Hannie said, "What if he does not go into the forest?" Van der Wiel said, "Then you try again the following Wednesday, and the Wednesday after that, until he does." None of the 3 women spoke for several seconds. Van der Wiel said, "You can say no. No one will judge you. This is not soldiering. Soldiers are trained for years. You have trained for 3 weeks. If you are not ready, we find someone else." Truus said, "I will do it." Freddie said I will do it. Hannie said I will do it. That night, none of them slept. Truus lay in bed. Her hands would not stop moving. She pressed them against her stomach. That did not help. She counted her heartbeats. She counted to 463 before she stopped counting. Freddie lay in the other bed. She whispered, "Are you awake?" Truus said yes. Freddie said, "What if I miss?" Truus said, "You will not miss, you have practiced." Freddie said, "What if I freeze?" Truus said, "Then I will shoot." That is why there are two of us. Freddie said, "What if we both freeze?" Truus did not answer. She did not have an answer. For 3 weeks they learned to shoot, flirt, and run, but their minds still asked one question. Could they kill a man when the count was in seconds? Heinrich Volker drank his beer in 3 large swallows. The glass left a wet ring on the newspaper. He checked his watch. 2:14. He had 6 minutes before he needed to walk back to headquarters. A girl in a blue dress approached his table. Truus Oversteegen was 17 years old. Her FN model 1910 weighed 400 grams in her purse. She had practiced this approach 47 times. None of those rehearsals included the smell of stale beer and wet wool. "Excuse me. Do you have a light?" Her voice was steady. Her left hand held the purse strap. That hand was sweating. The leather strap felt slippery. Volker looked up. His eyes were very blue. "I do not smoke." This deviation from the script lasted 3 seconds. Truus's mind processed the change. Her rehearsed response was, "For yes, here you are." She had no line for no. She began to turn away. "Operation abort. Next Wednesday. Wait." Volker gestured to the chair. "You can sit. I do not need the whole table." Truus sat. She ordered tea with hands that did not tremble. She did not know how they stayed still. Her jaw ached from clenched teeth. They talked for 8 minutes. He was from Hamburg. He missed the hills. The Netherlands was too flat. He had 2 children. A boy who wanted to be a pilot. A girl who loved her doll named Greta. Truus listened. She nodded. She smiled when he mentioned his daughter. The smile felt like a crack in glass. She said her name was Anneliese. She lived on Kleine Houtstraat. This was true. Lies anchored to truth are easier to remember. At 2:22, she made her offer. "I know a quiet place in the forest. We could talk without everyone listening." She had practiced this line 33 times. It sounded natural. Volker looked around the cafe. 3 other customers. An old man sleeping in the corner. The waitress wiping counters. He stood up. A walk would be good. They left at 2:23. Freddie watched from 40 meters away. Hannie waited in the forest 18 meters from the kill zone. Her rifle was a Mauser Karabiner 98K, 5 rounds, bolt action. She had cleaned it twice that morning. The forest path was soft with pine needles. The air smelled of damp earth and resin. Volker talked about his wife's cooking, how she made sauerbraten with red cabbage, how he missed it. Truus counted their steps, 180, 190, 200. She stopped walking. Volker took 2 more steps before noticing. He turned. "Is something wrong?" Truus reached into her purse. The movement was smooth, practiced. Her fingers found the checkered grip. The metal was warm from her body heat. She pulled the FN model 1910 free. Volker's expression changed. Not fear, cognitive dissonance. His brain refused to process the image. A girl in a blue dress holding a pistol. His hand moved toward his holster. A trained response. Faster than Piet had ever moved in rehearsal. Truus aimed at center mass. She squeezed the trigger. The shot missed. The bullet tore through Volker's uniform sleeve. The sound was enormous in the quiet forest. Birds erupted from trees, a cacophony of wings. Her ears rang. A high-pitched whine drowned all other sound. She saw Volker's mouth move, but heard nothing. He drew his Walter P-38. From 18 meters away, Hannie Schaft fired once. The rifle report was different, deeper, more final. The 7.92mm bullet entered Volker's back between the shoulder blades. It shattered his fourth thoracic vertebra. Everything below his chest went numb. He fell forward. His pistol dropped into pine needles. He caught himself with his hands, kneeling, not dead, not alive, in between. Truus stood 3 meters away. She still held her gun. Her arm was extended. Her hand was white from gripping too hard. She did not fire again. Volker tried to crawl. His legs did not respond. His arms pulled his torso 10 centimeters, 20. His breathing became wet, a gurgling sound with each inhalation. Blood filled one lung. He looked at Truus, not with anger, with profound confusion, as if asking her to explain how this happened. His right hand moved toward his breast pocket, fingers clawing at the wool uniform, trying to reach the photograph inside. His wife, his children, the girl with the doll. His fingers never reached the pocket. The hand fell, palm up, fingers curled. The wet breathing slowed. One breath every 4 seconds, then 5, then none. Silence. It lasted 8 seconds. Then Truus heard the forest again. Birds, wind in branches, her own heartbeat. Freddie appeared beside her. "We need to go. Now." Truus did not move. She looked at Volker's hand, still reaching. Hannie walked over from her position. She checked Volker's neck for a pulse. None. She took his identification papers, his wallet, his pistol. She opened the wallet. The photograph was there. A woman smiling, 2 children in Sunday clothes. The corner was bent from being carried. Hannie put it back. She took the wallet anyway. Robbery motive, different routes, walk normal. Hannie's voice was calm, professional. Truus walked, path 2, residential streets, 6 minutes 12 seconds at normal pace. She passed 2 German soldiers at a checkpoint. One said Guten Tag. She nodded, kept walking. They saw a girl in a blue dress. Nothing worth remembering. She was invisible again. She reached the safe house at 2:41. Freddie arrived at 2:44. Hannie at 2:47. Van der Wiel was there. He poured ersatz coffee that smelled like burnt grain. "The body will be found within the hour. Gestapo will make arrests by evening. You were not seen." Truus sat. Her hands began to shake. Violent tremors. She pressed them between her knees. "It did not help. I missed. Hannie did not. The target is dead." He tried to reach the photograph. Van der Wiel was quiet. Then, "I know. I practiced 47 times. Practice is not reality. You know that now." That evening, Gestapo arrested 6 men in the Jewish quarter. All were innocent. One was Samuel Katz, 47 years old, tailor, wife and 3 children. He was held for 6 days, released for lack of evidence. His name stayed on a list. 3 months later, Samuel Katz and his family were deported to Westerbork, then Auschwitz. They died in the gas chambers on arrival, October 19, 1943. Samuel Katz had never held a weapon. He died because the Gestapo needed suspects after a German officer was killed. This was the mathematics of occupation. 1 death required 6 arrests. 6 arrests created 6 names on lists. Lists became death sentences. Truus learned about Samuel Katz in December 1943. She did not speak for 3 days. In 2014, historian Sophie Poldermans asked Truus about the first kill. Truus was 91 years old. "Do you remember his name?" Heinrich Volker. 34, 2 children. The photograph was bent at the corner. "Do you remember the man arrested because of it?" Samuel Katz, 47, tailor, 3 children, all dead, October 19, 1943. She paused. Her hands, now old and spotted, rested on the table. They did not shake. "I remember all of them. Every name, every face, you carry them. The weight does not get lighter, you just learn to stand under it. The forest outside Haarlem still stands. Tourists walk the same path. They do not know about the wet breathing or the reaching hand. There is no plaque, no memorial, just trees and silence and pine needles covering everything. They killed one man. 6 innocents died in his place. This was the mathematics of war, and it was only the first lesson. The Gestapo report on Volker's death was 3 pages long. It listed 12 possible motives: robbery, personal grudge, resistance operation. It did not mention teenage girls. The investigating officer, a man named Klaus Schreiber, wrote one line in the margin: professional hit, likely British-trained commandos. He was wrong, but his error was logical. On July 22, 1943, 8 days after Volker's death, new orders arrived at every checkpoint in Haarlem. Search all civilians regardless of age or gender. Random bag inspections increased from 5% to 40%. The machine had learned its first lesson: assumptions kill. Truus saw the change immediately. She carried a basket of laundry past a checkpoint on Grote Markt. The soldier, a new face, stopped her. He was young, nervous. His fingers trembled as he lifted the wet sheets. He found nothing. He apologized. His Dutch was bad. Sorry. Orders. The orders were effective. In the next 2 weeks, the resistance lost 3 couriers. All men, all caught with forged documents. 1 was executed. 2 were sent to camps. The Oversteegen sisters remained operational. Their advantage shifted. It was no longer that they were never searched. It was that they were searched last. Frans van der Wiel adapted the protocol. No more direct approaches in cafes. Too risky. The new method was indirect observation. Watch the target for 7 days. Learn his patterns. Find the one moment when he was vulnerable. The next target was Oberleutnant Karl Richter, 26 years old, married 8 months. He carried his wife's photograph in his breast pocket. He patrolled the railway yard every evening at 7. He always stopped to smoke a cigarette by the same broken freight car. He was alone for exactly 4 minutes. The plan was simple. Freddie would position herself on the roof of a nearby warehouse. 60 meters. Clear line of sight. A hunting rifle with a scope. She would fire 1 shot when Richter lit his cigarette. The match flare would be her signal. On August 3, 1943, Freddie lay on the warehouse roof for 3 hours. The tar paper was hot from the sun. It smelled of asphalt and pigeon droppings. At 18:58, Richter appeared. He walked to the freight car. He took out a cigarette. He struck a match. Freddie aimed. The crosshairs steadied on his chest. Her breathing slowed. She had practiced this shot 80 times. Her success rate was 92%. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle cracked. The sound echoed across the railway yard. Richter dropped. The cigarette fell from his lips. It lay smoking on the ground next to his body. Freddie disassembled the rifle in 11 seconds. She climbed down the fire escape. She walked away, the rifle parts hidden in a laundry bag. She passed 2 German soldiers. They were running toward the railway yard. They did not look at her. Karl Richter died instantly. The bullet passed through his heart. When they found his body, the photograph of his wife was in his hand. He had been looking at it when he died. His wife received the notification 2 days later. Killed in action by enemy sniper. She never knew he was shot by a 16-year-old girl from a rooftop. The Gestapo response was mathematical. They tripled patrols around railway yards. They placed snipers on every high building. They arrested 20 men from the surrounding neighborhoods. All were questioned. All were released. The investigation focused on male snipers, former hunters, military veterans, anyone with rifle training. They did not question girls carrying laundry bags, but the machine kept learning. By September 1943, security protocols had changed 17 times. Officers no longer walked alone. They varied their routes. They avoided patterns. The resistance adapted in turn. They used bicycles, trams, sewer tunnels. Each new method worked for 2-3 operations, then the Germans adapted again. On October 12, 1943, Truus was assigned to kill Hauptmann Friedrich Bauer. He was 38. He supervised interrogations at Gestapo headquarters. He never left the building without 2 armed guards. Van der Wiel said the only vulnerability was his car, a black Opel Admiral. It arrived every morning at 08:15. Bauer sat in the back seat. The driver smoked outside for 3 minutes before departure. The plan was a time bomb. A Dutch resistance chemist built it from a clock, battery, and 2 kilograms of explosives. It fit inside a hollowed-out dictionary. Truus placed it under the driver's seat during the 3-minute window. She wore a maid's uniform. She carried a feather duster. No one questioned a cleaning girl. The bomb exploded at 08:32. Bauer's car was 20 meters from headquarters. The blast killed him instantly. It killed the driver. It killed a civilian cyclist who was passing by, a woman named Lena de Vries, 42 years old, mother of 3. She was on her way to the market. She had nothing to do with the war. Truus saw the explosion from 2 streets away. She saw the black smoke. She heard the screams. She learned about Lena de Vries that evening. Van der Wiel told her, "Casualty of war, collateral damage." The words felt hollow. Truus did not sleep that night. She saw the cyclist in her dreams. Not Bauer, not the driver. The woman with the market basket. The Gestapo response was brutal. They executed 10 political prisoners in retaliation. They arrested 50 civilians. They imposed a curfew. The resistance had killed a high-value target. The cost was 11 innocent lives. This was the new mathematics. 1 German officer equaled 10 Dutch prisoners. The equation was written in blood. By November 1943, the Oversteegen sisters had participated in 11 operations. 7 successful kills, 3 failures, 1 aborted. But the cost was mounting, not just in German lives, in Dutch lives. Hannie Schaft was captured on March 21, 1945. She was betrayed by an informant. The Gestapo found her with a pistol and forged papers. They executed her 3 weeks later. Her last words were, "I shoot too." She was 24 years old. Truus and Freddie attended her funeral in secret. They stood 300 meters away. They watched as the coffin was lowered. They did not cry. Their tears had dried up months earlier. After the funeral, Van der Wiel found them. He said the war would end soon, maybe weeks, maybe days. He said they should stop, go into hiding, survive. Truus said no. She said they would continue until the last German left Haarlem. They conducted 2 more operations in April 1945, both successful, both followed by German reprisals. More arrests, more executions. The mathematics became unbearable. On May 5, 1945, Canadian tanks rolled into Haarlem. German soldiers surrendered. The war was over. Truus was 21. Freddie was 19. They had survived. The next day, a Dutch newspaper published a list of local resistance heroes. 23 names, all men. The Oversteegen sisters were not mentioned. They were not heroes. They were ghosts. In 1946, the Dutch government began awarding medals. Resistance fighters lined up at the town hall. Truus and Freddie did not go. Their mother asked why. Truus said medals would not bring back Lena de Vries, or Samuel Katz, or the 10 executed prisoners. They tried to return to normal life. Truus worked in a bakery. Freddie became a seamstress. They did not speak about the war, not to each other, not to anyone. But the war did not leave them. Truus woke screaming 3 times a week. Freddie could not stand the sound of fireworks. Their hands shook when they heard police sirens. In 1950, Truus married a carpenter named Jan. He knew she had been in the resistance. He did not ask for details. He found her once in the kitchen at 3 in the morning. She was scrubbing her hands raw under cold water. She said they would not come clean. He held her. He did not ask what she meant. Freddie never married. She lived with their mother until Truus died in 1962. After that, she lived alone. She drew birds again. She never drew people. The machine of war had stopped. The machine of memory continued. It adapted. It learned. It never forgot. In 2014, a Dutch filmmaker named Margaret van der Linden interviewed Truus Oversteegen for a documentary. The interview took place in Truus's small apartment in Haarlem, the same city where she had killed men 71 years earlier. Van der Linden asked the first question. What was the hardest part? Truus was 91 years old. Her hands rested on the table. They did not shake. The silence afterwards, she said. The silence was worse than the shots, she explained. After each operation there was silence. No celebrations, no congratulations. Just the walk home, the waiting, the news of reprisals, the names of the arrested, the names of the executed. The silence between each name was a wait. Freddie was interviewed separately. She was 89. She sat in her garden drawing birds. The filmmaker asked about the first kill. Freddie put down her pencil. I remember the smell of the roof. Tar and pigeons. I remember the match flaring. I don't remember his face. That was the pattern. They remembered details, smells, sounds, textures. They avoided faces. Truus died on June 18, 2016. She was 92. Her daughter found her in her bed, peaceful. Her hands were open, no longer clenched. Freddie died 2 years later, on September 5, 2018, one day before her 93rd birthday. She was alone when she died. A neighbor found her the next morning. She was sitting in her chair by the window, a sketchbook on her lap, half-finished drawing of a sparrow. Their funerals were small, family only. No military honors, no speeches. They were buried in the Haarlem General Cemetery. Plot 892 for Truus, plot 901 for Freddie. 23 meters apart, Hannie Schaft's grave is in the same cemetery. Plot 437. It is visited by thousands each year. School groups leave flowers, tourists take photographs. She is a national hero. The Oversteegen sisters are not heroes, they are footnotes. Their story exists in archives, doctoral theses, a few documentary films. They never gave interviews until they were in their 90s. By then, most people who cared were dead. In 2019, a historian named David Van Holt published a paper titled The Mathematics of Resistance, Efficiency versus Morality in the Dutch Underground. He analyzed 11 resistance cells. The Oversteegen cell had the highest kill-to-arrest ratio. 12 kills, 0 arrests, 100% efficiency. He also calculated the collateral damage. For every German officer killed, an average of 3.2 Dutch civilians were executed in retaliation. For the Oversteegen sisters, the number was 4.1. Their efficiency came at a higher price. Van Holt interviewed former Gestapo officers for his research. One of them, an 87-year-old man living in Hamburg, said he remembered the Haarlem killings. We thought it was a British SOE team, professional, disciplined. We never considered women. It was a blind spot in our training. The blind spot was not in their training. It was in their worldview. Women were victims or helpers, not assassins. That assumption cost them 12 officers, but the sisters paid a price too. Van Holt found medical records from 1952. Truus was diagnosed with war neurosis. Symptoms: insomnia, nightmares, hypervigilance. She refused treatment. She said the memories were her punishment and her duty. Freddie's records showed a different pattern. She developed a tremor in her left hand in 1947. It was diagnosed as essential tremor. But it only appeared when she was tired, or stressed, or when she heard loud noises. Their mother, Truus, never spoke about the war. She died in 1962 of a heart attack. Her death certificate listed no contributing factors, but her neighbors said she jumped at every door slam. She kept a packed suitcase by her bed until the day she died, ready to run. The forest where Volker died is now a nature reserve. Families have picnics there. Children play hide and seek among the same trees where a man died, crawling toward a photograph. There is no plaque, no marker, just a quiet clearing where the pine needles grow thicker. In 2020, a forester named Peter de Jong found a rusted pistol in that clearing. It was buried under 30 centimeters of soil. He took it to the police. The police identified it as a Belgian FN model 1910. Serial number matched records from a 1943 Gestapo report. It was Truus Oversteegen's gun. The police returned it to the family. Truus's grandson didn't want it. He donated it to the Resistance Museum in Amsterdam. It sits in a glass case now. Label: FN model 1910, used by Dutch resistance, circa 1943. No name, no story, just a gun. Some visitors stop and look at it. They see the rust, the worn grip. They don't see the 17-year-old hand that held it. They don't see the missed shots, the wet breathing, the reaching hand. That is how history works. It turns people into footnotes, footnotes into museum labels. The filmmaker asked Truus one last question in 2014. Do you consider yourself a hero? Truus looked out the window. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Heroes are for stories. I am not a story. I am a person who did what she had to do. There is a difference." Freddie was asked the same question. She laughed, a short, dry sound. "Heroes don't have nightmares. I have nightmares, so no." They won the war. They lost their peace. That was the transaction. No medal can balance that equation. Today, their street in Haarlem is still there. Kleine Houtstraat. The buildings are the same. The apartment where they hid Jews is now a yoga studio. The crawl space behind the stove is sealed shut. The landlord's office is a coffee shop. People live normal lives there. They drink coffee. They do yoga. They complain about the weather. They don't know that two sisters once walked these streets invisible, carrying guns in laundry baskets, saving lives, taking lives. The war is over, but its mathematics continue. Every life they saved had a name. Every life they took had a name. Every life lost in reprisal had a name. The numbers are fixed. The moral calculus is not. In the end, there is no answer to the question, was it worth it? There is only the silence after the shot, the walk home, the waiting, and the memory of a hand reaching for a photograph that it never touched. Truus practiced 47 times before her first kill. She thought repetition would make it feel routine. Like ironing shirts for 5 cents, like carrying laundry baskets through checkpoints. It never became routine. 71 years later, her hands still shook when she touched metal. The bruise on her palm never fully faded. Perfect operational record. 12 kills, 0 arrests. But the nightmares lasted longer than the occupation. Here is the question this story does not answer. Were 8 years of poverty good training for war, or did war just exploit skills that should never have been needed? German procedures were logical. They caught real threats. Truus and Freddie were not soldiers. They were survivors who learned the wrong lesson at the wrong time. The forest near Bloemendaal still stands. Tourists walk the same paths. They do not know what happened there. Maybe that is how Truus wanted it. If you think about this story tomorrow, subscribe. We tell one forgotten underdog story every week. If this changed how you see resistance, write one word in the comments. The skill poverty taught them. I read every response. And if you know someone who needs to hear how weakness became a weapon, share this. Some stories matter more than algorithms.